There are roads we take to get somewhere new, and roads we take to find what we've lost. This is the story of a journey, not just across mountains and rivers, but through love, loss, and the quiet spaces in between. Told through the eyes of Hunter, a loyal Chesapeake Bay Retriever who carries a promise in his heart, this is the story of how one family found their way back home. This is the road to Willow Creek.
The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, like when Mom read a book and the fire crackled in the wood stove. This was the other kind. The hollow kind. The kind that echoed. Mom moved slower now. Her footsteps dragged across the floor like they had forgotten how to find their rhythm. She didn't hum anymore. She used to hum when she cooked or folded blankets, little tunes that told me everything was okay. Now the only music was the sound of her sighs. I stayed close to her. I always did. It was what Grammy told me to do, the day before she left. She'd been lying on her bed, the smell of medicine and lavender all around, her hand resting on my head. Her voice was thin, like a leaf trembling in the wind. "Take care of her for me, Hunter." I didn't understand everything she said that day, but I understood that part. Dogs always do. After that, I never let Mom out of my sight. When she cried, I pressed my head against her leg. When she didn't move for hours, I sat beside her, breathing slow and steady so she could hear that she wasn't alone. Emmi tried too, bouncing around, bringing Mom toys, her dead grass coat glinting in the sunlight that barely came through the curtains. Indy watched from his spot by the window, tail flicking once every now and then, his old eyes soft with worry. We were all doing our part, in our own ways. But no one could reach her the way Grammy did. Mom would stare at the photo on the mantel, the one of the two of them at Willow Creek. Grammy had her arm around Mom, both of them in matching flannel shirts, sunlight spilling over their shoulders like honey. There was a creek behind them, sparkling between tall pines. Every time Mom looked at that picture, I could smell the ache rising in her chest. One morning, the house smelled different, brighter. Mom was moving again, folding blankets, packing clothes, opening the cupboards that hadn't been touched in weeks. The van doors thumped open and shut. Emmi wagged like crazy, thinking it meant adventure. Indy just groaned from his bed, too old to get excited until the engine actually started. I followed Mom to the van. The back was filled with camping gear, sleeping bags, the old cooler, 3 food bowls, and a bag of treats that Emmi had already tried to sneak her nose into twice. Mom looked down at me and said softly, "We're going to Willow Creek." I tilted my head. The words meant nothing, but the tone meant everything. Willow Creek. The name carried something heavy and sacred, like a scent that had waited years to be found again. Mom ran her fingers through my fur. "That's where she taught me to fish," she whispered. "Where she told me the world was bigger than what we could see." Then she smiled. Not the big carefree kind, but a small one that wobbled and shone all the same. And I knew this was part of taking care of her, following her into the world wherever she needed to go. The van started with a deep rumble, like an old dog clearing its throat. Emmi jumped into the back seat, her paws dancing. Indy climbed in slow, his hips stiff but his heart still loyal. I took my place in the front, beside Mom, where I could see her hands on the wheel and smell her pulse when it quickened. The house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, but I didn't look back. Dogs don't live in what's behind us. We live in the moment, and right now, the air through the window smelled like something new. We drove for hours. The rhythm of the tires on the pavement became its own kind of lullaby. Every once in a while, Mom would reach over and scratch behind my ear, and I'd lean into her hand. She didn't say much at first. Then, somewhere past the open fields and the first rise of the hills, she started talking. Soft, like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. "Your Grammy loved this drive," she said. "Every year she'd take me to Willow Creek in that old camper van. We'd stop for ice cream halfway, play in the river, camp under the stars. Her voice caught, but she kept going. I can't explain it, Hunter. It's like she's been calling me there. I didn't need to understand the words. I could feel it. The way the road carried her forward, the way her heart seemed to find a pulse again. Emmi slept with her head on my paw. Indy snored softly in the back, his fur twitching in dreams. The sunlight slanted across Mom's face, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't look broken, just human. We stopped by a river that evening. The air was cool and smelled like wet earth and pine needles. Mom let us out, and Emmi bounded straight into the water, splashing wildly. Indy waded in up to his chest, content to let the current roll around him. I stood in the shallows and watched the water slip past my paws. Something about it felt familiar, the way it moved, the sound it made. Like I'd been here before, in another time. Or maybe Grammy had. Mom walked into the river too, shoes and all, and stood there for a long moment. Then she turned, laughing through tears. "Remember this?" she said to no one in particular. She looked down, and I saw her eyes go wide. I'd found something, an old worn stick half buried in the mud. I picked it up and dropped it at her feet. For a second, she just stared at it. Then she laughed, a real laugh, the kind that cracked open the sky. She knelt and hugged me, pressing her wet face into my neck. "Oh, Hunter," she whispered, "you always know." That night, we camped by the water. The air was crisp, filled with the hum of insects and the crackle of the small fire Mom built. The stars spread wide above us, glittering like Grammy's jewelry box. Mom told us stories about fishing lines that got tangled, about marshmallows that caught fire, about how Grammy used to wake up before dawn just to watch the mist rise off the creek. Her voice softened. She said every river leads home. I lay my head on my paws and listened to the current whisper against the rocks. Maybe she was right. Maybe rivers carry more than water. Maybe they carry love too. When the fire died down, Mom leaned against the van, wrapped in her old flannel jacket. I curled beside her, feeling the steady beat of her heart. The crickets sang their quiet song. The world was still. For the first time in weeks, so was she. Maybe that's why I love water, I thought. It never stops trying. And as I drifted off to sleep, I could almost hear Grammy's voice again, warm and close as a breath. "You're doing just fine, Hunter."
The storm and the mountain pass.
The rain started as a whisper against the van roof, soft, like paws padding through puddles. Mom didn't seem to notice at first. She sat by the fire's glow, her hands wrapped around a mug of cocoa, watching the last embers fade to orange. Then the whisper became a growl. The sky cracked open. Lightning flashed white across the riverbank, and the air smelled sharp, like metal and pine needles crushed together. Emmi barked once, startled, then tucked herself against Mom's leg. Indy gave a low huff, the kind that said he'd seen storms before and wasn't impressed, but I could tell even he didn't like how close this one felt. Mom gathered our blankets and climbed into the van with us, closing the sliding door just as thunder rolled through the valley. For a while, the world outside disappeared. Only the sound of the storm and our breathing filled the space. The rain hit the roof so hard, it felt like the sky was trying to talk to us. Mom's hand trembled a little as she stroked my head. "It's okay, guys," she whispered. "It's just a storm. It'll pass." But I could smell her fear, not of the weather, but of something deeper, the kind that hides under the ribs, the kind that comes from remembering. I pressed closer until her hand stopped shaking. Emmi curled against her lap, small and trembling. Indy stretched out by the door, keeping watch even as his eyes drooped. Then, just for a heartbeat, the thunder faded, and I heard something else. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the rain. It was a hum. Soft, warm, familiar, like someone singing a tune under their breath, a tune I'd heard before on quiet nights back home. Grammy's hum. I lifted my head and sniffed the air. The van smelled like rain and wet fur and lavender. Faint, but real. Mom's eyes were closed, her head resting against the seat. She looked peaceful for the first time since the storm began. I stayed still, guarding the quiet. When the thunder returned, it sounded farther away. The storm moved on, leaving the air heavy but clean. Mom opened her eyes, smiled faintly, and whispered, "We made it through." I wagged once, slow and steady. She was here, I thought. I could feel her in the quiet. By morning, the world had changed again. The sky was washed clear, pale blue stretching as far as I could see. The air smelled fresh and new, pine, mud, and sunlight all tangled together. The storm had knocked down branches, but it had also cleaned everything it touched. Mom made coffee on the camp stove while we ran through the grass, shaking water from our coats. Emmi chased the steam from her mug like it was alive. Indy found a patch of sun and melted into it. Mom smiled at us. "All right," she said. "Let's go find the mountains." The road wound upward, twisting through forest and fog. Trees lined both sides, tall and still, their needles whispering secrets to the wind. From my seat beside Mom, I watched the world change, the air thinning, the smell of salt and river giving way to cold stone and moss. Every few miles, Mom would reach over and touch the old photo of her and Grammy taped to the dashboard. She didn't say anything, but her thumb would brush over Grammy's face, and I could feel her chest loosen each time. Music played softly from the radio, an old song, scratchy and sweet. Mom started humming along. It was the same melody I'd heard in the storm. We stopped at a scenic overlook halfway up the pass. The valley below stretched forever, green and gold in the sunlight. Mom stood at the edge, eyes shining. "She used to stop here," she said, almost to herself. "Every single trip. Said it made her feel small in a good way." Emmi sniffed the air, tail wagging. Indy plopped down beside me, content. I stayed by Mom's side. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out something, a handful of wildflowers she'd picked by the road earlier. She knelt and held them out to the wind. "I brought these for you, Mom," she whispered. The petals lifted one by one, caught in the mountain breeze, and drifted away like tiny pieces of sunlight. Mom watched them disappear over the edge, tears glinting, but her mouth smiling. The wind took the flowers, I thought, but I think it gave them back to her. We kept driving. The mountains rose higher, their shadows long and blue. The van rattled over gravel roads that seemed to lead nowhere, and yet Mom kept going. Her eyes were steady now, her shoulders no longer weighed down. I could feel it. Something had shifted. That night, we found another small clearing to camp. The air was thinner here, filled with the sounds of night birds and the slow breath of the forest. Mom built another small fire, though the flames barely reached past the cool mist. "Almost there," she said, scratching my ear. "Willow Creek's not far now." I wagged once, though I didn't need to know where we were going. I trusted her voice more than any map. Emmi curled up beside me. Indy lay close to the fire, his eyes half open but watchful. The wind moved through the trees, soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby only the forest knew. And in that rhythm, I heard it again, the hum, the faint sound of Grammy's song carried by the pines. Mom froze. Her eyes darted to the fire, then to the trees. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I wagged slowly, pressing closer to her leg. She smiled through a tear. "Hi, Mom." We stayed like that for a long time. No words, no movement, just the sound of the wind weaving through branches, wrapping us in a peace I hadn't smelled in months. When the fire died down, Mom lay back on the blanket, staring up at the stars. I rested my chin on her chest, feeling her heartbeat against my fur. "Almost there," she murmured again, but I knew she wasn't talking about Willow Creek anymore. For the first time in a long time, I thought, She wasn't trying to outrun the past. She was walking beside it.
Arrival and goodbye.
The next morning, the sun rose through a silver mist. Dew clung to the grass and sparkled like tiny stars fallen from the night before. The air was cool, thin, and still, the kind of quiet that feels alive, as if the whole world is holding its breath. Mom poured her coffee, steam rising like a ghost's whisper. Emmi and Indy sniffed around the campsite, tails waving in the soft light. I stretched, shaking the night off my coat. Mom smiled down at us. "You ready?" I wagged once. The road turned narrow and bumpy as we drove deeper into the mountains. The van creaked and groaned, but Mom didn't slow down. She kept her eyes on the horizon, her hands firm on the wheel. Then, after one last turn through a tunnel of trees, the world opened up. And there it was. Willow Creek. The sunlight spilled across the clearing like warm honey. Pines framed the edge of the water, their reflections rippling across the surface. A breeze stirred, carrying the smell of wild mint, damp soil, and home. Mom parked the van and stepped out slowly, like she didn't want to break the moment. Emmi leapt out first, barking with joy, racing toward the water. Indy followed at his own pace, wading into the creek until the cool current brushed his chest. I stayed beside Mom as she walked to the edge. Her boots sank slightly into the mud. She stood there, staring at the water, her fingers clutching something in her pocket. After a long silence, she knelt down and pulled it out. A small silver locket. I recognized it by scent. It was Grammy's. Mom turned it over in her hand. "I wasn't ready to let this go," she said quietly. "But I think she's already here." She opened the locket. Inside was a tiny photo, her and Grammy at this very spot, younger, laughing, sunlight dancing on their faces. Mom smiled through tears. "We made it, Mom." She set the locket in the water. The current tugged gently, then carried it away, spinning it through sunlight until it disappeared downstream. I stood beside her, my fur brushing her arm, and she rested her hand on my head. "Thank you, Hunter," she whispered. "You kept your promise." I pressed closer. The world around us felt full, like Grammy was everywhere, in the rustle of the pines, in the glitter of the creek, in the warmth of the air that wrapped around us. That evening, the sky painted itself gold and pink. Mom built one last fire by the water. Emmi chased sparks that popped and drifted upward. Indy dozed with his muzzle resting on his paws. Mom sat with her knees pulled close, staring into the flames. "You know," she said softly, "she used to say that everything we love leaves a mark on us, like a paw print on the heart. You might not see it, but it's always there." I tilted my head, listening. She smiled at me. "I think you've got a few of those paw prints too, buddy." I wagged, slow and steady. The fire's glow flickered across her face, and for the first time since Grammy left, there was light in her eyes, not just from the flames, but from inside her. We sat together in silence. The creek whispered beside us, the stars above blooming one by one. Somewhere, in the soft rhythm of the night, I could hear that hum again, Grammy's tune, carried through the trees. It was faint, but it was there. And this time, it wasn't sad. It was home. Morning came gentle and golden. Mist rose off the creek, curling through the sunlight. Mom packed slowly, stopping every so often to take in the view, the rippling water, the shimmer of the pines, the place where she'd let the locket go. Before we left, she knelt in the damp grass and pressed something small into the earth. One of Grammy's old collar tags, the one that had hung from her keychain for years. She patted the ground, whispering, "Stay wild, Mom." I sat beside her the whole time, quiet and still. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew what it meant. She wasn't saying goodbye. She was saying thank you. When we climbed back into the van, the air felt lighter. Emmi curled into a sunspot. Indy yawned, settling against the seat. Mom smiled, eyes glassy but peaceful. The van rolled forward, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. Out the window, the trees swayed in the wind, slow and gentle, like they were waving us on our way. As the road curved downhill, the scent of pine faded into wildflowers and warm dirt. The air tasted new again. Mom turned up the radio. A song played, the same one she and Grammy used to hum. She sang quietly, voice steady this time. I rested my head out the window, the wind rushing through my fur, carrying the scent of home and something more, something forever. And in that moment, I knew my promise was kept. She's smiling again, Grammy, I thought. We're all going home.
Love doesn't end when someone leaves. It lingers in the wind that moves the trees, in the water that remembers every ripple, and in the hearts that keep on loving. For Hunter, for Mom, for Emmi and Indy, Willow Creek wasn't the end of their journey. It was the beginning of peace. Some promises never fade. They just find new ways to keep us company. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more of our adventures.